Hello and welcome to the Rogers Brief. I'm Adam Rogers. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy this content and to share it with others as well. We just finished day 6 of the Mass Casualty Commission proceedings, and really the first full week of substantive proceedings where we heard evidence, or at least presentations of evidence. In the last 2 days, including today, were devoted to the other participants, the non-commission participants, making requests to the commissioners to have certain particular witnesses called as witnesses for sometime later in the commission proceedings. And so, as I've said before, this was somewhat of an unusual process whereby participants really need to ask to have witnesses and then have to really put on the record the questions they may ask, topics they may cover, and that sort of thing. So it's an unusual process. It really gives the witnesses an advantage that they wouldn't have in other circumstances to know the questions and the topics in advance. But anyway, that's the process that the Commission has chosen. There were 18 officers for this first portion, just covering the first part of the massacre that took place in Portapique proper. And of those, from what I understand, there's 6 supervisors, and the rest, the other 12, I believe, are more what would be considered frontline police officers and 911 operators. So it was an interesting day. As I mentioned before, there were no opening statements, no opportunity for opening statements given to the participants, the non-commissioner participants, but today was really the first opportunity to hear them and hear them put their positions forward, and really revealed much about each party's interests. And in particular, the two police lawyers, or the two entities representing the police, had many chances to speak today. So there was the Department of Justice, represented by Laurie Ward and Patricia McPhee. Ms. Ward is a lawyer who is also counsel to the DOJ at the Desmond Inquiry, so I've gotten to know her quite well. As well, Ms. McPhee I've known through some litigation work. Both very good lawyers. The other is Natasha Najawa from the National Federation of Police. Now, this will be an interesting point that may arise later in the proceedings, because the two DOJ lawyers, Ms. Ward and Ms. McPhee, are representing the RCMP itself, while Ms. Najawa is representing, which is essentially the union for the police officers, all the police officers below the level of staff sergeant. So one is representing the entity, the other the individual officers, and they are aligned right now. They were today, at least, on these questions. We'll see if that changes as events unfold and as facts emerge. Anyway, their perspective today was that no officers should be called to testify, and they leaned heavily on the Commission's mandate to be trauma-informed, and they interpret that to mean that we should consider the trauma experiences of the police officers. They've already given statements and have been interviewed typically by the lawyers for the Commission, and so they've already provided their evidence, in effect, is their position. And to the limited extent that they agreed there were any gaps in the evidence provided through their statements, the lawyers for the DOJ and for the National Federation of Police suggested that their officers be given the opportunity to answer questions submitted to them in writing, so like a take-home test, rather than being called to testify in the stand and have the opportunity for cross-examination, follow-up questions, and so forth. So we'll see. It's not clear what the commissioners are going to do with this dispute. I mean, we have the parties representing the families and those most affected asking for these witnesses to be called, and on the other hand, the lawyers for the police and the police organization saying no, they shouldn't be. So the commissioners certainly have a decision to make, and it's going to be a decision that really reveals in many ways their approach to the entire Mass Casualty Commission proceedings. Trying to read between the lines of some of the interactions between the commissioners and the lawyers. One kind of stood out, which was Michael Scott from Patterson Law, who was very passionate about asking for witnesses, and gave a good articulated why it's important that we take in evidence through examination and cross-examination. Dr. Stanton, Commissioner Stanton, cut him off at one point and said, well, you've had an opportunity through the work that was done over weeks developing these foundational documents, and isn't that the better way to do it, just to take your suggestions now and use that to improve the foundational documents. And just listening to that and reading some of the body language made me think she was inclined to not hear some of these witnesses if they could be avoided at all. And I kind of suspect Chief Justice MacDonald is of a similar mind, although I really think it would be difficult for them to refuse all requests for witnesses, but we'll see what they do. I'll talk about that a little further, but actually the first thing that happened today, remember at the end of the day yesterday, there was the day wrapped up early because there was a discussion about a proposed expert from the National Police Federation. And this was Dr. Nick Carleton from the University of Regina, a professor there, a psychologist or psychiatrist, who was proposed as an expert to talk about the traumatic experiences of police officers who have investigated serious crimes and difficult circumstances. And his proposed area of expertise was to sort of give a blanket presentation as to why police officers shouldn't be forced to testify in those circumstances. But it became very clear very quickly that he was unlikely to be qualified as an expert. He's never before been qualified as an expert in court. Although that was interesting too, because he was asked about this by Rob Pinio from Patterson Law, or it was pointed out to him, and he said, asked if he was ever qualified as an expert before in court, and he said, not that I can recall, which is I say in my blog piece, a real red flag kind of an answer in any circumstances. It's usually one of those, answers given by people that don't want to answer the question. But in this case, even more strange in a way, because expert witnesses are often, they're very eager to be named as an expert witness and declared as an expert witness. They put this on their CV and such. And so for an academic in particular not to recall whether they've ever been an expert witness before was a little strange. But anyway, the other probably more serious issue with his report was it was really just a document review. He hadn't done any independent study to determine, what the impact of traumatic experiences are on officers that then have to testify about the subject matter. So, and also he hadn't dealt with any officers before or studied any situations where officers had to testify in a public inquiry setting. So the commissioners took a short break, and then came back and determined that they didn't need to hear from Dr. Carleton, and that was so that was that. They'll decide the issues of any officer testifying is going to be decided on a case-by-case basis, depending on the probative value of their testimony and any personal circumstances they may wish to put forth. So after that was dispensed with in the morning, there was a discussion. Each lawyer then got up and said, well, here's the witness I want to hear from, and here's why. Some of them were, some of the issues identified. Well, first of all, the first 911 call came from, Orchard Beach Drive, yet the officers, first responding officers, went down Portapique Beach Road. Why is that? Identification of the timing of the Zal Thomas House fire. Dealings with the children, that was an issue that was brought up too. When they went there, two of the officers that went seemed to have gone against supervisors' instructions. And then when they got to the house, there was supposed to be this code word, pineapple, to let the children know that's a legitimate police officer. but the officers that actually went to the house didn't use the code word, and yet situation they were able to evacuate the children. So some questions still emerging from that part of the scenario, but that wasn't elicited out in the statement so far. Another question was about the containment of the community. Did the officers that were driving towards Portapique meet the Wortman in his fake police car going in the opposite direction? They've said they haven't. Some questions about that too, and how that's possible, and just trying to sort out parts of the timeline. So certainly seemed to me, from my understanding of the evidence so far, and I've listened to it closely, that there's some issues there where evidence could be helpful, and I think people really want to hear evidence. So we'll see what the commissioners do with that next week. The other question, or the something that came up through Commission Council, sort of in response to requests for certain officers, was that some of the officers, including Stuart Basselt and some of the other early responders, are going to be participating in witness circles later in the commission proceedings. What's a witness circle? Well, it's not quite clear what that means. It's not laid out in detail in the on the commission website. It's not something that's common from what I can see to inquiries. You see sentencing circles and other kind of circles in restorative justice criminal matters. But the only example I could see was the Nova Scotia Home for Coloured Children Restorative Inquiry, which used circles extensively. And in that inquiry, they say they use them to, what they say is, disrupt common adversarial assumptions, and it allows us to think about connections and interrelationships, and to share space to talk and deliberate together. So you can imagine a situation with, police officer, firefighters, ambulance drivers, or other first responders, community members maybe, participating in, a discussion and having that kind of, you can see some value in that. The interrelationship among the agencies and the various stakeholders. But certainly it's not a way to get specific facts and deal with, the minutiae of evidence in the way that you can do through cross-examination. So certainly I wouldn't expect the commissioners to view that as a substitute for having particular witnesses come and testify. So we'll see what that means in practice when, I guess in months to come when those circles take place. So that was it for this week. Monday, they did wrap up a little early today because the weather is unfolding in Halifax and throughout Nova Scotia. It's snowing here as well. Next week on Monday, the commission is going to go through the remainder of the police officers that have been suggested for this portion of the situation as potential witnesses, and deal with that. Hopefully identify those who are going to testify and make a decision on that basis, and then we'll proceed from there. So that was it for today. It was an interesting day. It really showed some of the parties and their interests. We went through our first potential expert witness, who was not accepted as an expert, so that's certainly significant. And then we went through some of the police officers, and we had an opportunity to hear from lawyers from most of the parties involved in this portion of the commission hearings, and see what kind of approach they're going to take. So it was quite interesting stuff. I'll be back Monday to watch the hearings and report to you. As I said, other posts, you can follow me on Twitter throughout the day. I do some posting of things that seem to be going on, from any legal matters that are ongoing. And this Sunday night, I'll be back joining Jordan Bonaparte in the Nighttime podcast. That's a live YouTube show starting at 9:15, and you can look up the Nighttime podcast on YouTube for that, and I'll share the links as well. So anyway, that is everything for day 6 of the MASH Casualty Commission proceedings. Don't forget to like and subscribe, share with a friend, and otherwise we'll see you next time.